your faith and pass it on. Share the gospel clear and strong. Stand for, claim your heritage of truth.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. As you know, our focus is to pass on lifelong confidence in biblical truth. And in order to do that, we have to believe it ourselves. Well, today my guests are Jeanne and Carol Kent, and they've written a book called Staying Power: Building a Stronger Marriage When Life Sends Its Worst. Now, there have been a lot of people who've been having trouble with their marriages since COVID, haven't they?
I think it's been tough because when you're cooped up together for long periods of time, if you already have some rockiness in your relationship, the worst is going to come out. So it has been very challenging for a lot of couples.
Jeannie, thank you so much for having us here. You know, when you just said that about when life sends its worst, I just think about this past year, and we all feel like the worst has happened to us, and we end up wondering what's going to happen, the rest of this year, or what's going to happen next year. And we get all of these apocalyptic feelings about the end of the world kind of scenario. And it's so good to know that in the midst of all of this, that God knows what we're going through, and He is in control. Sometimes we don't feel that way, but just to intellectually know.
And we can cling to biblical truth in the middle of it all.
Yes.
Right.
And I love that the whole premise of this show is on claiming God's promises in the
Yes.
middle of every life situation we go through. And certainly our marriages fit that situation very well.
Yes.
If we didn't have God's word, what would we do?
We'd probably not stay married.
Very true, very true.
I mean, think about it. If you didn't try to live out the way God expects us to live, the way He teaches us to live in His Word,
Yes.
we'd only be thinking about ourselves.
That's
and
right.
that's not the basis for a marriage, is it?
No, not at all.
In this book, you talk about how you and also Cindy and David Lambert, who wrote this
Yes.
with you, dealt with some really difficult situations. So can you explain the background of why you two couples wrote this book?
Well, it was really wonderful because Dave and Cindy work at a conference that we put on every year called the Speak Up Conference. And Dave and Cindy have worked in the Christian publishing field for years and years, both in acquisitions and as well as editing and writing books. And as you know, I'm an author, and this is Jeanne's first book, so he's now an author. He made it, yes. And so we've gotten to know each other over the years because Dave and Cindy are always on the teaching team at the Speak Up Conference, where we do a speaking track and a writing track. So every year when we go to Michigan and host this conference, when it's in person, we usually spend a week or two up there because we have family there, and we get together for a day with Dave and Cindy. So we were kind of kicking back one evening. And
Normally, we meet Dave and Cindy in western Michigan, right along Lake Michigan, and beautiful sandy beaches and everything. And we usually go hiking for an hour or so, and then we'll go someplace to eat. And then we come back to where we're staying, or we go to their house, and we just sit and have some snacks and just talk about life and what we've been through in the last year. We started talking about, there's not many books about when our marriages are struck from the outside by something that happens from the outside. There's lots of books about what happens with infidelity or with pornography or those kinds of things within the marriage. But what happens when you've got a good marriage and something happens? Maybe it's economic problems or it's grandkids or whatever happens from the outside. And we have a specific case, as you probably know some of our story, with our son that we may talk about here in a few minutes. So we decided maybe we could work on something like that and come up with a premise.
Well, we started to list the things that you come across with almost a shock. And it might be that you are raising a grandchild. And that's exactly what happened to Dave and Cindy because their son had gotten involved with some drug issues and there was some trafficking of drugs, and their grandchild was now in an unsafe atmosphere. and they really needed to rescue their grandchild.
Wow.
And so they really can identify with this. And in our case, our son, who's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, met and married a previously married woman with 2 little girls, and there were multiple allegations of abuse involving the biological father. And I know you and I have talked on the show before, Jeannie, about the fact that our son unraveled mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and made a devastating choice when he believed his little girls were threatened. And he wound up pulling a trigger, and a man died. And so he is now serving a life without the possibility of parole sentence in the state of Florida. It wasn't something we expected. We didn't even think we knew anybody who had an incarcerated loved one. Boy, were we wrong. We found out that 1 out of every 100 adults in the United States is in jail or prison, more per capita than any country in the world. And so we started to realize this is a secret that people don't talk about. And it's like this little hidden part of them. And so we thought about all of the other categories, like raising a child with a mental disability, where you may never quit, parenting that child in a very hands-on and personal way when you might be thinking about retirement. No, we're caring for our child who may have Down syndrome, or they may have something that means they can't be on their own indefinitely. And we made a list of about 12 different categories of the fact that we didn't choose this. Our marriage was going along just fine. And then this thing from the outside hit us. Are we going to let this destroy us, or will we say, with God's help, if we stand on the Word of God and His principles, how can we help this build a stronger marriage instead of allowing it to destroy our marriage?
Wow. That's a big challenge.
It is a huge challenge.
Your first chapter is "We're in this together or not."
Or not.
So how do you make sure that you're in it together when something happens, a tragedy, like a child dies or your child gets arrested? How do you do that?
Jeannie, one of the things that we talked about when we were brainstorming about what we wanted the take-home value of this book to be is that couples need to make what we call pre-decisions. In other words, when a crisis hits our lives, what are the non-negotiables? What are the things that we are committed to no matter what happens, and commit to that early? And one of those is, I will respect and honor the opinion of my spouse. And I will be the first to say, I don't think he's always right. But
and she's often right, it's sad to say.
So my non-negotiable means I am going to listen to his opinion and how he feels about this, and I will listen without talking. And that's hard for me because I'm a firstborn of 6 preachers' kids, and that means I'm bossy and I'm a little controlling, and I think
opinionated.
Yes.
No,
oh, yes.
that
Thank
too.
you. You know my wife, yes.
I have known you a while. You probably can tell that about me.
20 years.
Yes. So anyway, it is an act of discipline for me to say, okay, Carol, rein it in. One of your non-negotiables is that you're going to listen to how Jeanne feels about this. And when I committed to that and followed through in our case with the shock of our son's arrest, I could hear the tear in his voice, and I could see it in his eyes. Mm-hmm. And I realized, even though he always gives me the impression that he might be stronger emotionally than I am in the middle of the devastation of feeling like you're a terrible parent because your child has been convicted of an awful, heinous crime. And I started to realize the pain he was in internally, even though for my sake, he put on a strong front. And there was something in that was so tender to me, and it made me love him more. Not that I didn't love him a lot anyway, but I felt the tenderness of who he is as a father. But I needed to be committed to listening to him before I would interject all of my ideas and my opinion and my evaluation of what had happened. And I probably added too much spiritual application, because I always do that, because I'm a Christian. So I have to come up with a reason for why everything happens. And I was not good at just mourning, mourning our losses. And just saying, I think of David in the Psalms and how often he would just pour out his sorrow before the Lord. And it was good for me to be reminded of the fact that it's okay with God when we do that. And I watched my husband pour out his sorrow and the sadness of having raised a son who he was very close to and still is, and to see him make a choice that ultimately cost him his life with his family and removed him from society for now 21 years.
And it changed your lives too.
Totally.
Jeannie, one thing that led up to this particular chapter is the university that Carol and I went to when we were very young. When we started college, the university we went to was so conservative that we couldn't hold hands. We couldn't walk along the sidewalk together. We couldn't sit together unless you were going to like the opera or an orchestra event or something like that. But they had one place that you could go and date on campus, and it was called the DP. And the DP stood for dating parlor. So this is old. All of you listeners out there, no kids would ever go through this today. But what was really good about it, though, was, and I should throw in here at this point, I was 17 when I first heard the gospel, and someone explained why Jesus died, and that Jesus died for my sin, for Jeanne Kent's sin. And that person who did that was Carol's father. And I wasn't dating Carol at the time. I was just a teenager in the church. And he led around our kitchen table my mother and father and me to the Lord when I was 17. We did not date until we graduated high school. And so when we were at the dating parlor at this very strict school, all we could do is talk. And so we ended up understanding each other a lot better than many young couples probably today.
Because you learn to communicate.
You learn to communicate. And instead of, making out or just going to a movie where you're not talking at the movie,
right,
or those kinds of things. So we talked about a lot of things. How do you envision what a marriage is going to look like? Or when it's time to make decisions, do I get the final say or do you get the final say? And why should either one? But we talked about it, all of those kinds of things, over the course of those years that we were in college. So we settled a lot of things early. Now that doesn't mean, when I use the word settle, it doesn't solve all the problems that come up in life, as we all know. And just because you've decided this doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be handled when the actual event takes place. But my wife, God bless her, has just given great encouragement to me as a husband in this relationship as we negotiate all of these twists and turns that have happened.
Well, and I think, Jeannie, to get back to your question, we're in this together. Jeanne and I have been married a lot of years, and we had been married a long time before Jason was arrested, and we were already committed to the fact that nothing would tear us apart. And when you first go through the shock and the embarrassment publicly of having your son's name in the paper as having taken the life of another person, it's hard to go out in public.
Oh, yeah.
And if we didn't have each other, it would have been so lonely. It would have been so hard. And so pretty early on, we made the decision that we were going to be honest about our journey, and we would publicly talk about the journey and what we were learning and what our challenges were in the middle of it all, and that we were in this together. And even if it was hard, even if we were rejected by some people because they wouldn't like our son's choices and we didn't like our son's choices, but it was something we were not going to let pull us apart. We were committed to being in it together for as long as it took. And it's been a long time now. But we are now seeing that because we were open it gave other people the opportunity to be open with us about their own journeys.
So it seems to me then that you're saying that the commitment to each other and the communication with each other is really important for that to
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
And I think, too, not to criticize each other, but to listen until you've heard what your spouse is saying and to affirm that you're listening. You don't always have to say, I agree with you, because maybe you don't. Maybe there are still issues to work out, but I'm hearing you. And that's a way of respecting our spouses, to hear them out, like, your opinion matters to me. And I feel like I'm still learning that, because sometimes I have places to go and people to see, and I want to get this show on the road. And I process very quickly, where Jeanne might take a little more time.
So I've learned to take my time in making decisions and in response to my wife. And because oftentimes in the past, if I respond too quickly, I regret the words that come out of my mouth.
I know